Regev, Senior Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, is with us tonight. Mark, thank you for giving us your time again. Can we start with the negotiations? We've got the family of a hostage who will be coming on the programme tonight. How would you explain to him what happened last night and why the Israeli government was not prepared to give this another 24, 48 hours?
I think our position was clear. We were willing to continue with the pause in the operation so as to facilitate the release of more hostages. We were prepared for an extension. Unfortunately, Hamas was not, and not only did they fail to deliver what they were supposed to do under the understandings that were brokered with the United States, with Egypt, with Qatar, not only did they fail to do so, they actually opened fire this morning on Israel, sending rockets from Gaza into the communities around the Gaza Strip. If that's not a declaration of war, I don't know what is.
I understand the negotiations continue in Qatar. How quickly could another pause come? The US is suggesting tonight it could even come as early as this evening. What are the prospects or likelihood, do you think, of the truce being resumed as early as that?
I can't comment because I don't know. All I can say is the following. Hamas had the opportunity. We would have had a pause today had they released hostages. My understanding is they've got close to 20 women they could have released in the framework of the existing agreement, yet they chose not to do so.
Are those women civilians, or would they be classed as IDF soldiers, Mark?
I think some of them are women in their 20s, and so they're civilians. They're after their army service, but I think Hamas says anyone who's of military age is still a soldier.
Right. The Secretary of State's been very clear that this phase has to be carried out different to the war that was waged in the north. And there we see Elon Levy today talking about the mother of all thumpings coming for Hamas. 170 have been killed in just 12 hours. Is that the sort of restraint that the War Cabinet promised Secretary Blinken yesterday?
So it's important. Our spokesman said very strongly that this is against Hamas. We will hit Hamas, and we will hit Hamas hard. We will hit Hamas relentlessly. But we also, as the spokesman said, we differentiate between civilians who are not the target of our operation and Hamas terrorists. And that's precisely why, if we talk about the situation in the south, that we have leafleted and sent messages in other ways to particular neighborhoods in Khan Yunis, not the entire city, but where we do know there will be Israeli combat, where there will be operations by the IDF. We've asked civilians to leave those particular areas because we don't want to see them caught up in the crossfire.
But you'll be aware, I'm from the leaflet that I've seen, there's a QR code on it which directs people to this IDF website. You'll be aware that because of the problems with electricity and connectivity, that information might not get to the people that need it. Are you prepared to give people the time to move and clear instructions, not just online instructions, so that they know what they're supposed to do?
So as you know, you sent messages in a variety of ways: phone calls, leaflet dropping, technology, radio and television broadcasts. And the truth is, in the north, which we've been criticized for, we actually gave people 3 weeks warning before the ground incursion started. And so we take very seriously international law, which says you have to differentiate between your enemy, in this case, the vicious killers of Hamas, and the civilian population, who we want them out of combat zones to safeguard them. And we've designated in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, I've seen the maps, so have the Americans, they've passed them on to the United Nations and others, specific safer zones where people can go and be out of harm's way.
How long do you think you've got for this second stage of the conflict, Mark? Because there are briefings coming out of Washington tonight that Secretary Blinken told the Cabinet yesterday they've got weeks, not months, to finish this.
So it'll take as long as we need, because we have to finish the job. And the goal is returning all the hostages, destroying Hamas's military machine, and creating a new situation in Gaza where never again will Israel be attacked like we were on October 7th. You've got to understand, if this isn't done properly, we'll just be back to square one and you'll be interviewing me a year from now about another war in Gaza. No, We don't want that situation. We want a situation where Gaza is demilitarized and de-radicalized, and the people of Gaza get a better government than this Hamas regime that has been terrible for them, first and foremost.
But you'll be aware that there are plenty of people, military analysts, people who are familiar with insurgencies, who say it will be impossible to completely eliminate Hamas, not to mention the psychology of Hamas, which will be supported by many, many people in Gaza. I just wonder if the strategy will have to change at some point, and might the Israeli government be prepared to consider what Hamas was saying to the BBC today, that they would be prepared to talk about hostages in return, all the hostages in return for a total ceasefire? Is that something that the Israeli government might be forced to consider?
No, but that would leave Hamas in power in the Gaza Strip. And that is unacceptable, because Hamas leaders themselves, I don't know if they said it to you today in their interview, but Hamas has repeatedly said, their leaders have said, that they would do October 7th again and again and again, if given the opportunity, if they had the capability. So we have to deny them the capability. There is no peace and coexistence with Hamas because they are dedicated to killing and butchering Israelis. We saw that on October 7th. And once again, they say they would do it again, not Mark Regev. So we have to find a solution without Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And ultimately, that will be good, I say again, for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this terrible regime that has brought them only poverty and bloodshed.
One last question. You'll be aware of the reports in the New York Times and Haaretz today about these documents that were given to the Israelis, that the Israelis had in their hands, which pretty much set out the entire plan. And it was almost done to the letter by Hamas on October the 7th. That plan was supposedly handed to a colonel within the Gaza division, and subsequent to that, there were reports that Hamas were carrying out training exercise that were in line with the documents you had. I mean, that seems to me like an enormous failure of intelligence. Are those documents going to be part of the inquiry whenever that comes?
Of course. Christian, you're 100% correct when you said this was an enormous failure. October 7th was a terrible, horrific day for Israel, and we paid for our failure in the blood of our people. That's the bottom line.
Well, how do you explain that? How do you explain that, Mark? Because it strikes me it's a little bit like the inquiry into 9/11, that the intelligence was there, the intelligence community knew about it, they just didn't put everything together. Why do you think there was a failure?
So from an Israeli perspective, it was just like Yom Kippur in 1973, when we were attacked from the north by Syria and Egypt in the south, and they took us by surprise as well. Look, it's clear there was a failure, and like in 1973, when the war is over, I'm sure that there will be a commission of inquiry, maybe set up under, as we did then, under a Supreme Court justice. We could also do parliamentary inquiries. Questions will be asked. We have to get to the bottom of this. Christian, we don't want this to happen again. That's the bottom line. We don't want this to happen again. We have always prided ourselves in Israel on having very, very good intelligence. And yet we've had this whole big mishap, which, as I said a moment ago, cost us in too much blood. So, of course, we want to get to the bottom of this. We have to learn the lessons that need to be learned.
Mark Regev, thank you for answering our questions this evening. Good of you to come on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.